Welcome to a special year-end episode of Sustainability in the Air. I'm your host Shashank Nigam, the CEO of Simplifying. Over the past year, we've recorded conversations that, taken together, paint a picture of an industry at a genuine inflection point. Not the inflection point the press releases talk about, the one where everything is progressing smoothly towards net zero, but the real inflection point, where progress is happening in pockets, where economics are finally starting to shift in some areas, and where the gap between what's said publicly and what's happening behind the scenes is becoming harder to ignore. In putting together this best of 2025 compilation, we wanted to do more than just replay highlights. We wanted to trace the trends that connect these conversations, from the fundamental question of whether SAF can scale fast enough, to whether we've been measuring the right things, to technologies that might make the whole debate look different in a decade. Some of these conversations happened earlier in the year, so some numbers have already shifted, but the structural insights, those remain sharp. So let's get into it. Understanding who controls what in aviation's emissions is fundamental to solving the problem, and the numbers might surprise you. Let's start with airports. Matt Gorman has been leading sustainability at London's Heathrow Airport for 16 years, which predates when most airlines even had someone in that role. He shared a number that reframes how we should think about airport sustainability entirely.
95%, and by the way, we include flights in our carbon footprint. That's the key thing to say. And not just flights close to the airport in the landing and takeoff cycle, but all the way to their end destination. So in line with what the UK government and other governments report. So no surprise then that 95% of our carbon footprint is to do with aircraft, moving on the ground at Heathrow, taking off and then flying to their end destination. The other 5% is what we call all of that 95% carbon in the air. The other 5% is carbon on the ground. The vast majority of that is not controlled by Heathrow either. There are three or four main things. There's what we call surface access, airport speak for how you get to and from the airport on the ground as a passenger or a colleague, our supply chain, our airport vehicles, and our own terminal buildings. If you then hone in on the scope one emissions, the bit that we directly control because we buy the fuel for our vehicles or to heat our buildings, it's only 0.1% of the total footprint. So what does that tell you? The 0.1% we've absolutely got to sort out. It's our problem. We've got to get our own house in order. But we've also clearly got to roll across the 100%.
0.1%. That's what Heathrow directly controls. Every time you see an airport announcing they've gone carbon neutral on their operations, remember that number. The real question is what they're doing about the other 99.9%. Heathrow's answer has been to use the levers they do have, landing charges, to influence the emissions they don't control.
We raise charges a little bit for every airline each year to create a pot of money. And we then set a target. So 2022, we started at 0.5%. And then each year it's gone up a bit to 1.5%, 2.5% this year and 3% next year. So we want 2.5% of all fuel at Heathrow this year to be sustainable fuel. So we create the pot and airlines then bid into that pot. And actually, we've been oversubscribed in each year.
By redistributing costs across all airlines and then rewarding SAF uplift, Heathrow made the competitive dynamics work for sustainability rather than against it. The scheme has been oversubscribed every year since it launched. Swedavia, which operates Sweden's 10 airports, has taken this even further. They achieved fossil-free operations in 2020, before most airlines had even set net zero targets.
Our CEO was very committed from the beginning.
A committed CEO who believed in this.
From the beginning, this fossil-free airport was not a goal, it was a vision.
Yeah.
But then we got the new CEO, and she said we must have this as a real target to strive to. And when we got our new CEO, the present CEO, he was he's at least the same committed.
Yeah. And they see it as a license to operate. I mean, if we don't do this, we don't have any license to operate anymore.
License to operate. In Sweden, the social pressure around flying is real enough that airports and airlines treat sustainability as existential, not optional. Swedavia now pays 50% of the SAF premium cost for airlines that uplift at their airports. Perhaps the most aggressive target I encountered was from Tamara Vrooman at Vancouver Airport, who moved their net zero target forward by a full decade.
You know, when you're trying to save GHGs, the sooner you do it, the fewer there are to save. So for us, we really challenged ourselves. Originally, honestly, it was 2040. We said, well, how can we do better? And not just do better by setting a target and hoping we get there, but doing better by crafting a detailed roadmap that actually shows us what we need to do to get there. And that's what we did. We found that 2030 was achievable. I tell any other airport CEO that asks me that it is achievable. You just have to start.
Tamara's observation is that airports have something many other businesses don't. They control the central infrastructure everyone uses. When Vancouver Airport switches to electric ground power or renewable energy, every airline at that airport benefits. It's decarbonization at the platform level. If airports can create incentive structures that make sustainability easier, why do airlines need that push in the first place? Earlier in the year, I spoke with Aaron Robinson from IAG, the parent airline of the likes of British Airways and Iberia and Vueling and Aer Lingus. He's got a unique vantage point, having worked on sustainability at United Airlines in the US before moving to lead SAF efforts at IAG in Europe. His research at the time showed that over half of the airlines worldwide still had not used any SAF. When I asked him why, his diagnosis went deeper than cost.
Airlines have long been founded on having safety cultures. And when it comes to operations, that's a very good thing. When it comes to innovation and change, and in particular technological change, that can be a very bad thing. I mean, I remember the first airline I was at out of University Northwest. Anytime we wanted to go and make a change, part of that decision was the benchmarking. Well, what is everyone else doing? And if others weren't going that direction, there was a high resistance to go and do something different. To me, it's the same with SAF and decarbonization more broadly. Why go and innovate and do something different, do something more expensive, if another competitor will do it for you? Who wants to go and be first? Being first is expensive. Being first has risks. Look at aircraft deliveries and engine problems today, right? Innovation is costly. Everyone wants to be a fast follower instead and let someone else take on the risks and the challenges, and I'll come and figure out how to do it better the second time.
Now that's a cultural problem, not just an economic one. Airlines are built on safety cultures, on not being the one who tried something new and failed. That mindset served them well for decades in operations. When it comes to decarbonization, it creates a collective action problem. One solution is to move together. That's the logic behind what One World Alliance did with Breakthrough Energy Ventures, launching a $150 million fund specifically for next-generation SAF technologies. Matt Ridley, who leads sustainability at One World, told me how the idea came about.
It actually started with a car journey with Pasha, who you know well. Yeah, so he and I were traveling down the West Coast. We were in the car, and I was probably, complaining about how difficult it is to do sustainable aviation fuel investments. You need a huge amount of knowledge, really specialized in kind of petrochemical engineering. You need extreme experience in venture capital. You need a big team because you've got to kiss a lot of frogs before you find the technologies that are really worth investing in. And so we kind of struck on an idea that actually, if everybody invested together, we could hire basically the best in the world in terms of that experience and that knowledge. We could end up with a much more diverse portfolio if we all club together. And we can also use the geographical spread of the alliance. We can use the geographical kind of networks as well as our own kind of knowledge of policy, and create something that no one airline would be capable of.
Airlines have been trying to do venture investing individually, each building small teams, each seeing a fraction of the deal flow, each lacking depth to really evaluate deep tech. By pooling resources through an alliance, they can access talent and deal quality none of them could individually. Airlines are already investing in current generation SAF, HEFA plants, alcohol-to-jet facilities to meet the near-term mandates. This fund explicitly is looking beyond that. E-fuels, novel pathways, technologies that might not be commercial for years but could change the cost curve fundamentally. Speaking of novel pathways, the SAF conversation usually centers on a few established approaches: HEFA, alcohol-to-jet, Fischer-Tropsch, and e-fuels. But some of the most interesting work is happening at the edges. Trevor Best runs Syzygy Plasmonics, a Houston startup working on a fundamentally different approach.
10% of our emissions come from methane. Another good 10+% comes from transportation. This allows us to take those emissions from one sector and turn them into fuel and eliminate emissions from another sector. Truly unique solution. Our core technology allows us to do this in a way that was not possible before. It allows us to do this at price points that can be competitive with fossil jet today, and carbon intensities that are incredibly low. And when we can get gas prices for $5 or $6 per MMBTU, and when we can get electricity prices for $50 or $60 dollars per megawatt, this starts to get really economic. And if we can get just a little below that, then we can actually hit jet fuel parity.
Jet fuel parity, not parity with other SAF, parity with conventional jet fuel. That's the goal everyone is chasing. Trevor's approach takes biogas from landfills and dairy farms and converts it to SAF using light-based catalysts rather than traditional thermal processes. And trust me, I've seen this in person and the process is quite amazing.
Because our technology is scalable, we can go to stranded assets. So these are landfills or dairy farms that are too far from the natural gas grid to connect in. And so our ability to shrink down to their size, go on site there where it is uneconomic to develop it, so we can get very low gas prices because they can't sell it any other way. It's just a cost for them. And then do this in such a way that we increase the yield of those assets. All of this helps us to achieve a value proposition that really isn't possible through other pathways that we see.
Traditional refineries need scale to be economically viable. Syzygy's technology works at smaller scales, which means they can go to feedstock sources that are too remote or too small for conventional approaches. They're testing this now at a demonstration plant in Uruguay, converting manure from 14,000 cows to SAF. It is this distribution and independence of working at smaller scales that can be the key to success for scaling SAF. Inertech in Germany is another company that is looking at this technology and scaling in a modular fashion.
So we thought when or if the renewable energy production is modular, so we talk about PV modules, we talk about wind turbines, which are modular, and we talk about modular electrolyzers, modular fuel cells, modular batteries, why should we talk about centralized e-fuel production, which looks like a refinery?
So our technology is actually a modular solution, a modular synthesis unit, which can be built in our headquarters in Karlsruhe or at other places. It can be pre-manufactured, and these modules can be brought very, very quickly to the so-called sweet spots for power-to-liquid production. So wherever you build up like a wind park or where you have an electrolyzer already running, you can build up these modules which have a perfect technical fit to the electrolyzers. And by this, we are overcoming this fallacy that you say, okay, first we need gigatons of green hydrogen. First we need gigatons of even green CO2 coming from direct air capture or whatsoever. But we can start right now. We can go to the sites where we produce green hydrogen today, where we have a CO2 source. And by that, we can produce. And the more modules we bring into the market, we ramp up, the cheaper the fuel is also, the cheaper the fuel will become until we achieve price parity with fossils.
Most of the conversation around sustainable aviation assumes we are trying to make existing flight patterns cleaner. Fly the same routes and similar aircraft just with different drop-in fuel. But some of the most interesting conversations I had this year started from a different premise entirely. Earlier this year, I spoke with Mark Allen, who left his position as Chief Strategy Officer at Boeing to run a startup called Electra. When a senior Boeing executive walks away to join a company most people haven't heard of, that's worth exploring further.
You know, a lot of people have been sort of thinking about electric competing with jet fuel, and it just can't win head to head, right? Jet fuel is just too energy efficient, 40 to 50 times as energy efficient on a weight adjusted basis. And so once you come there, you say to yourself, but I still know the energy transition is real. Sustainability is real. All these trends are going to happen in aviation. So how's it going to happen? And the answer is it's only going to happen as electric presents new forms of air travel capability that jet fuel can't match. That's how electric is going to win.
40 to 50 times. That's the energy density gap between batteries and jet fuel. Mark's insight is that this isn't the right competition. Instead of asking how electric can replace jet fuel, ask what electric can do that jet fuel fundamentally cannot. Electra's answer is access. Their aircraft can take off and land in 150 feet, not a runway, but a parking lot, a helipad in Manhattan downtown. Once again, I had a chance to visit Electra operations near Washington, D.C., and I was blown away by their blown lift concept.
And it's really hard for me first, and for most people, to look at a fixed-wing airplane that is just an airplane and looks just like an airplane, and then to come to the slow, dawning realization that it actually can land in the profile of a helicopter. It's like, it blows your mind. It's so counterintuitive because for 100 plus years, we've watched fixed wing airplanes operate in a certain way. And here comes, the new guy on the block, Electra, going, hey, I can fly like a helicopter with the economics and the safety of a fixed wing airplane.
An even more radical rethink came from Billy Thalheimer at Regent, whose sea gliders aren't aircraft at all. Legally, they're vessels operated by mariners, not pilots. Sea gliders are wing-and-ground effect vehicles that fly just above the water surface on a cushion of air.
Sea gliders are really the first new mode of transportation, entirely new mode since the helicopter, almost 100 years ago now. Sea gliders are addressing transportation struggles on these regional routes between, say, 50 and a couple hundred miles for the 40% of the world's population that lives in these coastal communities. Everyone has that painful route, whether it's along a coastline or across a body of water that's just very difficult. And sea gliders will simultaneously be the fastest, cheapest, greenest, safest, and most comfortable way to travel on these routes.
Wing-in-ground effect vehicles have been tried before. Previous attempts struggled with three fundamental problems: poor wave tolerance, limited maneuverability, and safety challenges at high speeds and low altitudes. Billy explained how Regent is exploring this differently.
Seaplanes, flying boats, and wing and ground craft of the past have been really constrained to inland waterways, rivers, lakes, sort of, low wave environment, certainly can't tolerate adverse weather. And that's been a real problem. If you only have a foot or two of weather tolerance, you very quickly get out of your operational domain. We actually fix both the wave tolerance and the maneuverability with that hydrofoil system. Hydrofoils are underwater wings. We get them from, the America's Cup Sail GP, sort of the advanced yacht racing community. And they lift the Sea Glider out of the water, giving us 5 feet of wave tolerance. So now we can operate in 90% plus conditions all around the world and be very reliable. The final one is safety, and that's where digital flight control systems come in. So now instead of having a human trying to operate this vehicle, which is simultaneously a boat, a hydrofoil boat, and a wing and ground craft, now you have the system operating this. The only controls available to the operator, who is a mariner and not a pilot, are boat controls left and right, fast and slow, and the system takes care of the rest.
What connects these conversations is a willingness to reframe the question. Instead of making existing aviation cleaner, what if we ask which trips should even be aviation in the first place? If new technologies might reshape aviation, how do existing airlines prepare? I explored this with Yolanda Stevens at KLM earlier in the year. Her role is rare. She's specifically focused on zero-emission aircraft technologies. And she started her career as a KLM pilot, which gives her a different perspective than most corporate sustainability heads.
This is a whole system change. A system change for infrastructure, for legislation, for ground handling, for safety. I don't want to, I will not recall everything here, but it's a big puzzle. So the system change, in order to get that going and to get it ready for the first flight on hydrogen, for instance, or battery electric, that means that all the players in the value chain have to play their part. And I am strongly convinced, and as I am convinced, but my whole company is strongly convinced that we, as an operator, in this case KLM, we have a responsibility to play that role. Because if we don't, then I think the speed will go down, or the knowledge will not be there, or the credibility of the brand will maybe not help. So we have a strong responsibility. We're 105 years old. We want to be relevant for the future, and the system change is not going to happen without the help of the big airlines.
KLM's recognition is that they can't just be customers waiting for new aircraft to arrive. The infrastructure for hydrogen, the certification frameworks for electric hybrid, none of that develops without airline involvement. So KLM sits on customer advisory boards for startups like Heart and Elysian, not because they have placed orders, but because their operational knowledge is essential to making these aircraft work in airline service. At the other end of the scale is Luke Farala, who runs Loganair, the UK's largest regional airline, including the world's shortest commercial flight at just 60 seconds. Their sustainability calculus is completely different.
If you're flying from the UK to America or further afield, sustainable aviation fuel right now is the best option, because in terms of the other options, it's less likely that emerging technology will support larger aircraft and commercial services with, more than 50 people on. I do not want Loganair to be considered in other groups of airlines for everything, because we're very different. If we were not here tomorrow, we'd have a big gap, and it'd be a big problem for the UK to connect itself. We can't just jump into the same pond of sustainable aviation fuel as perhaps, a larger airline might.
Luke's point is that SAF makes sense for long haul because the alternatives, hydrogen and electric, can't yet deliver the range. But for flights measured in minutes than hours, electric and hydrogen become viable much sooner. Loganair is betting on multiple technologies simultaneously. They've also done something unusual with carbon offsetting.
Everybody who's flying has no choice but to leave a carbon footprint. And therefore, we think it's responsible of us and we think it's responsible of our customers to have a small levy to include something which gives us an ability to offset something on their behalf. And actually, we get very little negative feedback about that, very little resistance, if any. I can't remember the last time somebody fundamentally disagreed or complained, which means the education of why this is important is getting through.
A mandatory £1 carbon levy on every ticket, funding local Scottish environmental projects. Sure, that's not in-setting, but I think it comes very close. It's not optional, not buried in the booking flow, it's just included in every ticket. And crucially, almost no complaints. That suggests that passengers are further along than airlines often assume. Putting this episode together, a few things struck me. First, the people doing this work are remarkably clear-eyed. None of them sold me silver bullets. Mark Allen knows electric won't replace long haul. Matt Gorman knows Heathrow only controls a fraction of a percentage of its footprint. Trevor at Syzygy knows biogas to jet won't be the only solution. Second, the economics are genuinely shifting. Sustainability is not just about being greener, it's about being better. Sure, it's not happening everywhere and not fast enough, but there's a shift. 5 years ago, most of these conversations would have been about aspiration. Now they're about implementation. Specific incentive schemes, specific pathways, specific timelines. Third, and the most uncomfortable, growth is still the elephant in the room. Every efficiency gain gets eaten by expansion. Until the industry or regulators grapple with that, we are running to stand still. If you want to go deeper on any of these topics, pick up our book, Sustainability in the Air Volume 2, because there are detailed chapters on some of these people and companies I have mentioned. And we'll be back in January with fresh conversations every week. Till then, happy holidays.